The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to our audience to our National Road Safety Partnership Program webinar, Keeping Safe Around Vehicles is Easy, Isn't It? Low Speed Vehicle Runover Prevention. And this webinar is brought to you by the NRSPP in partnership with the Australian Road Research Board and the Georgina Josephine Foundation, a Downer Road Services charity partner. And the NRSPP has been established to provide a collaborative network for Australian businesses and organisations to help them create a positive road safety culture both internally and externally. It aims to help organisations of all sizes across all sectors to share and build road safety initiatives specific to their own workplace and beyond. And it's delivered by ARB and funded primarily by a government coalition and ARB. And for more information, please visit the website, the NRSPP website. Now, Jerome Castlake manages the NRSPP and its many activities and has organised for us to hear this very important message today. My name is Rosemary Patterson and I'm moderating instead of Jerome today, but he will be back for our next NRSPP webinar. Today's webinar will go for approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes for question time throughout. We'll be recording the session and we also have some videos that we'll post separately in case they don't come out very clearly today. As with all our webinars, we invite the audience to ask questions or share experiences through our question function. Now, the Georgina Josephine Foundation was formed after Peter and Emma lost their youngest daughter in a low-speed vehicle run-over accident in the garage at home in April 2011. And I think what struck me when I chatted to Peter and Emma last week was their energy to create change in the road safety space through their powerful message. And we'll talk later about how to support them. So welcome, Emma and Peter. Let's get started.
Thank you.
Hello, guys.
Okay. But just before we start, we've got a little bit of a video. Now, as Rosemary mentioned, if it doesn't work very well for you on your computer today, there are plenty of links and it'll be on the NRSPP website as well as our own.
And I think the story is fairly easy to follow, Emma.
Yes, that's right. Just watching typical family morning at home, getting out to the car. Most average families these days would have a similar sort of story every day of the week, heading off to school or work.
Now, as you can see, that was very close. Luckily for them, it was just a stroller. But for us, unfortunately, it wasn't that. Didn't end up that way. We are one of many that actually ran over our children. So what we're going to try and do today is pretty much put you guys into our shoes to see how easy it can happen. And then we're going to go through a bit later on how we can prevent it from occurring at any place. So what I want to try and do is put you guys into our shoes. So I want you to just imagine coming home from work. It was a Saturday afternoon. It's a hard day, about 5:30. I remember driving up my driveway and reversing my car, my tool trailer, into my garage. Only this time I felt a bump. And I screamed out around the back of the car to see my little girl. She was flat on her back, and I had these eyes just looking at me. And then they started filling up with blood. I realised what I've just done. I screamed out to Emma, come help me, quick, Emma. Emma, quick, I've just run over Georgie. Please come help.
For me, it was just another ordinary Saturday, with enough time to do one more job before I put the veggies on for tea. So I decided to mow the kids' backyard play area. And obviously kids and mowers don't mix, so I had the kids in the house where I thought they were safe. I'd been mowing for a little bit. I'd checked on the kids in the house to make sure they were okay. I went out to the garage to grab the fuel can, put some more fuel in the mower, put it back in the garage, and was mowing. And I just remember glancing around just to catch sight of a trailer going around the front of the house before he went to park in the garage. Next thing I know, Peter's running through the back gate, screaming at me. And when I stand up on the mower and pull out the earplugs and hear him yelling, "I've run over Georgie, I've run over Georgie." It's your worst nightmare. Often as a mother, I was worried that I would be too busy doing something and something bad would happen. I'd be too busy hanging the washing out or whatever. One of the kids had hurt themselves. Well, now my worst nightmare's just occurred. I ran into the garage, landing on the concrete, not wanting to look because there was so much blood. I checked the back of her head, but it was all coming from the back of her head wasn't cut open. It was all coming from a little face. She was light as a feather as we tried to do CPR, and I'm trying not to scream down the phone at the ambulance lady. Both of us knew at the time, but didn't want to say to each other, she was gone on the spot. The effect of this incident was immediate, not just on us, but on all those around us. The neighbours came up, offering help. They'd heard our screaming. Then the ambos arrived. The first fellow was a local man whose wife was in my mother's group, and our kids still do gymnastics together. The second ambo was a lady who's pregnant, and here she is doing CPR on someone else's baby. And the last ambo was an older fellow who we found out later apparently went and sought counselling after our job. It's something that he doesn't normally do. We'd rang Grandma, so Peter's mother arrived before the ambulance left. This is a lady who 30 odd years ago lost a son in a car accident, and now she has to deal with losing her grandchild. It seemed to take forever for us to get into the hospital in the ambulance, praying for a miracle all the way that I knew wasn't going to happen.
I want you to imagine doing CPR on your little girl. You know what's just happened. You just ran over her. There's no way that she can survive. But you still do it anyway, hoping for that miracle. Maybe there might be just one chance that she'll survive. And then you see the ambulance. They turn up, and then she gets carted away, and Emma hops in the car in the ambulance and takes them away to the hospital. And then you find the courage to actually follow her. I remember walking in the door. I seen the faces of the nurses and the doctors, and you just knew there's no way. She's gone. The next minute you're getting tapped on the shoulder by the police, asking you all these questions. You get treated like a criminal. Well, at the end of the day, you've just ended a life. And it just happened to be your daughter's.
So you get out of the ambulance at the hospital, all the staff take her in, you're sort of left standing at the side thinking, what now? Then someone takes you into a little side room, and then a few minutes later, the doctor comes in and says, look, all we can do is make her comfortable. So they take you into the hospital room, they put her in your arms and say that you can stay there as long as you like. Trust me, forever is not nearly long enough. I'm rubbing her little hands and her feet so that they don't get cold, waiting for her to take a breath and wake up, but she doesn't. Next thing, your husband is called out by the police, and the reality dawns on you. Oh my God, is he going to get charged? He didn't mean to do it, and he can't go to jail because he's got 3 other kids to look after.
I want you to imagine her sitting in the hospital there, lying on the bed, and it's time to go. We had to leave her, our little girl. I remember saying to the nurses, please just keep her warm. Please look at her, she's lonely. Please take care of her, we've got to go. Just make sure she's warm. Then I remember writing a letter to the coroner, telling them, please don't interfere with our little girl. We know what happened. I was there. I was the one that done it. Just bring her back to us, please. Leave her in peace. Just bring her back to where she belongs.
It seemed forever before they brought her back from the coroner's office to the funeral parlour, so we were able to see her and dress her. Then we had to make the decision whether to take the other kids to see her. Our then 4.5-year-old wanted to know, was Georgie flat? Obviously, the language I'd used around getting in and out of the car. Don't run around the car or they'll, you'll get run over and get flattened. Well, she literally thought Georgie was flat. So we ended up taking the two eldest in to see Georgie, partly to show them that Georgie wasn't flat and that her spirit that makes her laugh and talk and sing wasn't there anymore, that at the special celebration we were going to the next day, the funeral, where we were going to say goodbye to Georgie, that we wouldn't actually get to see her.
I want you to imagine watching your children. They were there playing on their own in the sandpit, and you could just tell that they were missing that little friend of theirs, and knowing that you were the cause of this. And then they come to the funeral. Now, I know as myself as a parent and as a father, I would do anything for my children. One of the things that I wanted to do was to be able to walk my little girl down the aisle when she got married. It's something that I can't do, obviously. So I decided that I'd take her coffin and put it on my shoulder, and I walked her down that aisle, and I took her down to a resting place. And then we were down there at just about to lower her into the ground. I remember watching it and knowing I will never see her again. This is definite. I want you to imagine, to look up and see all your family and friends, and imagine the faces that are on them as they were watching this happen. And then you realise that all that pain and anger was caused by you. It's just something that I could have prevented, but I didn't. And now I've got to pay the price by losing my little girl.
When something like this happens, your entire world is turned upside down, never to be made right again. And it's not just yourself, it's your family, your friends, your colleagues, and local people throughout the community. As far as I know, there wasn't anyone in Young who hadn't heard about it or wasn't touched by it in some way. And I think at one stage I had every sympathy card off all the shops in town sitting on my kitchen table. Unfortunately, that's our story. And I know for many others it's also a similar story for them. Low-speed vehicle runovers. All the research that I did after the accident, I got online and I couldn't believe the numbers that came up of these sorts of accidents that happen all the time across Australia and overseas. In Australia, the statistics are on par with pool drownings. The national average is 7 children between 0 and 14 killed and 60-odd seriously injured every year. In Queensland, research in Queensland had shown that there was nearly 3 children every week getting run over. I can tell you between March and July this year, there's been 7 fatalities. So halfway through the year, we'd already hit our national average. All of those children were 3 years and younger, and all of them were drivers. All the drivers were parents or grandparents. And I'm also very sad to hear of another little 5-year-old who was hit by a car in a driveway in Victoria on the 1st of December, only a few days ago. So that actually brings our national toll for this year up to at least 8 fatalities. And unfortunately, since we've been working on this awareness since 2011, when Georgie's accident happened, there has been no less than 7 deaths of children in similar accidents every year that I've got on my list. All the research I did boiled down to 3 main things that we need to do to help prevent these accidents. There's no one silver bullet. There's a whole range of protective measures. One area is changing the environment, especially in terms of children and where vehicles are. Another area is looking at our vehicles and the technology and the features that our vehicles have. And the last one, of course, is the education campaign, which is part of what we're doing today.
Now the question is, why do we need to change? This is a picture that we've found from kids in cars. You actually find that there's 62 children behind this vehicle. And as you can see on that mirror, you can't see one of them. So we decided that's a great idea. Let's try that for ourselves. So we did some demonstrations. This one here is at Dubbo on a Dad's for Kids Day. As you can see there, we have Wayne Pearce, who's a famous footballer. He was our volunteer at the time. And you could just see the head of that grown up at the back there. All the other kids, he couldn't see. And it scared, obviously, him and everybody else that was watching. So we've decided to make this into an ongoing thing that we take around to schools and also to big corporate foundation organisations, just to show that it's not just kids, that it's anybody that can't be seen. So this one here is obviously Young Public School, and obviously Downer, who are one of our bigger sponsors. So what we have is the problem is that all machinery has a blind spot, whether it be a car, machinery, trucks, even a lawnmower. They all have blind spots, and we need to know what that blind spot is before we start driving.
Now, actually, just on that too, for people who are interested, there's a new video I only just saw last night from New South Wales Centre for Road Safety and New South Wales Transport on trucks and blind spots. I've aimed to repost it on our Facebook page, but I'm pretty sure if you look up truck blind spot videos, you would find it as well. It's a really good one. This is a little picture that we were sent by a friend whose husband worked in an electrical company. This picture has done the rounds of some of the bigger corporations like BHP, as you can see up in the corner there. And this is a typical reason, or not typical, but this is a good reason to show why checking around vehicles is so important. Apparently someone had done their circle of safety around their vehicle at work and unfortunately found a little person who'd got stuck in the wrong place. Okay, so as I mentioned before, all the research shows the approach to reduce these statistics needs to include those three items. So the first one we want to look at is changing the environment.
As you can see here, this is just a picture of separating the kids from the cars. So we can look at around our house, around our workplace, if there's some way that we can put a fence up where that separates anybody from the car, and it's a barrier that we can put in place. Because at the end of the day, if they're not near the car, if they can't get near the car, they're not going to get hit. The next one we can start to look at is our housing design. Can we have it that all the living and the family areas are all at one end of the house, and then the garage is on the other end of the house? Once again, it's a long area, big area there where the kids aren't going to be playing, where the cars are going. Here's a little picture of the diagram, what we can do around our own house, around environment. The red lines that you see here are barriers, are fences that you can actually, you might be able to install a fence up your driveway. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you might be on acreage. But you can certainly create a safe place out the back where the kids can play. And if a car turns up, you know that they're not going to be on that driveway.
Now, we worked with the federal government a couple of years ago looking at driveway design guidelines. These are still available online. The website's there. If you look up driveway safety, federal government or Australian government, you should find links to this. The guidelines were put together, sent out for community consultation, and then there was a discussion paper put out as a result of that. Unfortunately, it hasn't gotten any further than that because we need the states to get interested and take it on board and maybe look at getting this information out to the various building groups for them to take it on board. But that's got some interesting points and simple things that people can do.
Now, one thing that people seem to miss that we become complacent with is actually our garages. If you have an attached garage to your house, what you're actually doing is driving a vehicle into the house where you think your kids or anybody's safe. Unfortunately, it's not the case. So we come up with a barrier that we can put in place. the internal door going into your garage. If you can put that door handle up to 1500 high, have it on a self-closer so it always goes back to the closed position, because there's no point just putting the door handle up if we're going to leave the door open. And a very important one is to swing it back in towards the house. That way that if they can go, the kids can go and get a chair, they might be able to reach the door handle, but they can't actually open it because they're going to be in the way. Just another barrier you can put in place around your house. Next thing that we also look at is, once again, on the garage. It's our roller doors. Most people now are actually are getting roller doors with motors on them, which is very convenient because you open the door and you don't get wet. The problem that it is that as soon as you push that button, you assume that there's nothing on the other side and you just drive in. So what we're trying to do is make it that if you can cut the power to that roller door, if someone's coming in into the garage, well, then you're not going to drive in. So this is what I've come up with, a little electrical device that once the internal door going into the garage is open, it cuts the power to the motor, to the roller door, and you can't enter. So you actually have to go and see why the door is not opening. Once again, if the access door into the garage is on a self-closer, it's always going to go back to the closed position. Therefore, there's going to be no inconvenience unless somebody is actually coming into the roller door. So all of these things that we're putting in place, we've actually asked some local councils to adopt this theory. And one of the councils is our local council. They have created the development control plan. So that means now that any house that's built in this shire actually has to put these doors and designs in place whenever they build a new house, whenever it's attached to whenever your garage is attached to your house.
Another area that is obviously a danger zone is shared driveways, battle axe driveways, longer driveways, and shared car parking spaces. Now, I know in New Zealand there was some research done there in terms of the possibility of fencing driveways. The government was looking at that at one stage. As I understand it, that didn't happen because a lot of properties were rental properties. So the families that lived there didn't actually own it and weren't able to actually put those fences in place themselves. So there's an potential issue there for maybe landlords to look at in terms of putting safety features in the properties that they own that people rent. Shared and battle axe driveways. I don't know how many people I've spoken to at various expos and displays where they've said, oh yes, we have a shared driveway, and those young blokes down the back, they just hoon up the side. They don't realise that there's kids here and so on. So maybe some way of communicating with the neighbours and talking to them about the use of that shared space. And shared car parks are a terrible zone for especially for children, because they are designed for vehicles. They're not necessarily designed for children. So it's really difficult to manoeuvre around a car park sometimes and keep especially children safe, but often too adults can be in danger as well if the driver's not looking carefully. Now, something that we've brought up, and we do presentations for building groups like the Master Builders Association as well, and something we've brought up for builders especially is there a duty of care towards families by builders to have such inclusions in their work? Now, it's in legislation that any house that's built must be of a safe standard, and we'd like to think that this sort of thing should be included in that safety, those safety items that are included in building work. There's a lot of push for accessibility of housing, which is fantastic. But also, too, we need to balance that with care in terms of children in a house where, what are the possibilities of them getting into areas that they shouldn't be or getting out of the house without adults knowing. So we're looking at, what's the likelihood of children being in a house over a building's lifetime. Yes, we might have elderly or disabled in that house, but we also need to consider families' needs as a whole. Okay, is there any questions on changing the environment so far?
Yes, we've just got a question about the automatic roller door cut-off switch.
Yep.
Paul was wondering whether it would be available to everyone eventually, or only new houses, and is it something that could be put up on the website so people can be shown how to make it?
Yes, certainly. At this stage, it was just one of my ideas that I come up with. It can actually be installed by any electrician. All it is actually a reed switch, and we do have it on our website. If you certainly want to have a look, jump on our website and have a look, and we have a lot of information about that roller door on it.
If you have a look on the tradies and builders page, under, I think on the tabs along the top on the home page, you go into what we do, and then I think it's on the side somewhere there, off the top of my head, tradies and builders. There's a lot more specific detail on there about that sort of information.
Thank you. So if Paul has any more questions or needs further clarification, write in. Otherwise,
yeah, certainly. Send us an email or something. Yep.
All right. Otherwise, let's move on to changing vehicles.
Okay. Yes. So, changing vehicles. As we mentioned, this is another area that needs to be sort of addressed, and there has been a lot of work done in this area in the last few years since we started doing this. For example, like we'd like to see overall in Australia, I know the Australian design rules are being, currently being looked at in terms of harmonising them with the global technical regulations, and I realise that's a very long process, but we'd like to see some kind of a reversing standard for vehicles in Australia, so in terms of rear visibility and autonomous emergency braking systems, which I know a lot of companies are already working on those sorts of items at the moment. I mean, we're seeing the automatic vehicles coming out where we're going to be able to jump in a car, push a button and off we go, and we don't have to steer or do anything. So this sort of technology is coming, but we believe that when, the government really needs to make sure there's a certain standard in terms of what features are included in vehicles. As I just mentioned, then the Australian design rules are going to be harmonised over time, I believe. And there has been research done by the Australian government, I think through Monash University most recently, in terms of reversing cameras and their effectiveness. There's also been studies done in America. And America is also, there's been a ruling by the Department of Transportation over there that I understand all passenger cars at least all new passenger cars must include a rear vision camera by next year as a standard feature when those vehicles are manufactured. Do you want to add something? So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening in this space, which is really good, and consumer demand has certainly driven a lot of that as well, which is another good thing. It sort of speeds up the process, I believe.
One of the examples of this new product is this one right here, and it's called Reverse Alert. It's a autonomous braking system that works for reverse that you can retrofit on any car. So once again, the technology is getting out there, but I just want to make clear that it's really important that it's technology. It does not replace an alert driver. We are coming too complacent at the moment. We're relying on our cameras and we're relying on these devices to brake for us. Once again, nothing beats an alert driver. So we just really want to push that message through. I'm all for reversing cameras to look at the blind spots before we actually leave, and to use them with our mirrors and also turning around as we're going, not be just fixated on the one piece of technology, because if it fails, we're in trouble.
And as I mentioned before, there's no one silver bullet layer of protection for this sort of thing. These are all just tools, and the tools are only as good as the user. So, yeah, as Peter said, there's no technology can replace an alert driver, but it can be a useful tool to help us to maintain safety in and around cars when we're driving and even when vehicles are stationary. So, any questions on the vehicle side of things?
Yes, we've got an interesting question from Chris, which if we can't answer it, we'll have to answer later. But he's asking truck semi-trailers don't even need reversing beepers. So he's asking, truck semi-trailers don't even need reversing beepers. Rigid trucks do. It's a question.
Right, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're not too sure on what can and can't be put on the trucks. But the thing with also, once again, with all these technology, which is the sensors and the beepers and everything like that, we can still come complacent with them. So we're trying to not make it that it's a need compulsory thing to have sensors on any cars. We just want a standard of more of visibility and once again, it's a lot of education too, to know that the technology is there to help us, but it's not going to prevent us. So we really need to know how to use our technology rather than relying on them. So I'm sorry, but I'm not too sure about whether sensors need to be on trucks or not.
Thank you.
I know there is a lot of. Oh, sorry. I know there is a lot of work being done in that area too, and I think TruckRight is another organisation that has a lot to do with visibility with trucks and safety around trucks. So it might be something they can look up to.
And Chris has corrected me, saying it was more a statement, a worrying statement than a question.
Yeah, that's right. As I said, there's plenty of blind spots around trucks too. That's a lot of it is the education of people around what to do around trucks.
I'll give one example of one of the stories that we've heard from a person that's had a near miss with sensors, and it's pretty much wraps up what the sensors can do and how they can fail us. One day there was every day that this person was reversing down their driveway, and there was a shrub at the end of their driveway, and every day that the sensor went off, every day that, and they just become complacent with it and realise it's just a shrub, until one day it was actually their pet dog that was behind that shrub, and they actually ran over their dog, and all they thought it was a shrub. So there's a prime example of what sensors, how we can be complacent when it comes to sensors or any technology.
And Chris has asked, can the auto braking unit be fitted to trucks with air brakes?
I'm not 100% sure. I believe that they are working on trucks and they do trials on them. So at this stage, I would say it's a yes, but I'm not 100% sure on what they can and can't do. Certainly Google reverse alert and they'll probably give you an answer.
And just a comment that Chris did have a truck reverse into a pedestrian last week, but very luckily there was no injury. So let's move on to education.
Okay, so education is obviously the most important thing in this whole area. The more people know about the issue and are aware of it, they're more likely to take measures on board and take it seriously as well. Now, doesn't matter what company you have, if you're looking at people driving to and from work, reminding them about safety, wanting to get home safely, getting to work safely. But also too, if you're a company that has fleet vehicles, workers going out to properties, for example, building groups or tradesmen, that sort of thing, that go out to a domestic property, what's their policy in terms of parking? Do they park in someone's driveway or do they park out in the street? Does any company that's got vehicles as part of their fleet, do they have a safety policy in terms of drivers doing a circle of safety before they get in the vehicle and drive? And that could be not only checking, making sure tyres are not flat and lights are working, but that there's no one around their vehicle. Is there a fleet policy in terms of the technology that's available in vehicles for drivers, like reversing cameras or autonomous braking? So there's some things for fleets especially to think about. The vehicle fleet in Australia, the average age, I believe, is about 10 years old. It takes 10 years for the fleet in Australia to turn over. And often, I know government cars are a good starting point for getting technology out into the general public arena. If the government vehicles are fitted with various technologies, then they end up being turned over and ending up in private hands as well, which helps the flow on of technology and useful tools into public arena. This is another little picture that I found, which was a great idea in terms of particular strategies that companies can use in terms of prevention of low-speed runovers, particularly with their workers moving in or out of car parks. This company from America, a driver, I think, had a near miss with some children that he just didn't see behind his vehicle. So the solution for that company was all the vehicles had a couple of witches' hats put in them. Every time a driver parks anywhere, they must put a witch's hat behind and in front of the vehicle. When they come back to get in that car and drive away, they have to do a circle of safety to pick up those two witches' hats and ensure there's no one around their vehicle before they get in. Simple solution and probably relatively cost effective as well. but it also would teach people the habit of checking around their vehicle.
Now, this picture is an example of what corporate organisations can do, and obviously this one is Downer. Now, this is a bit of an education and also a barrier, I guess you could call it. So what they've adopted is to create a red zone between any vehicle or plant that is in the moving position of 10 metres in front and behind. So that is their red zone. So if you'll get caught in that red zone, obviously you're going to be reprimanded, and this is an area that they don't want them to be, because that obviously is their red zone. So what they're actually doing now is the people that actually work for Downer are actually taking this message home, and they're telling their family to stay away from that red zone, because they're obviously doing that every day. They're just getting immune to it now, that they have to stay out of that red zone. So once again, it's a fantastic strategy that these guys have put in place to keep their people away from that red zone or that vehicle. So it's just one example of what we can do, and it actually brings it back from the workplace and back into our family lives. Now, the biggest thing that we're going to try and do today is to change people's mindset. I know my mindset was, especially when you watch TV and you watch 60 Minutes and you see all these accidents happening, and all I can remember saying to myself was, that's very sad for that poor person that's just lost their child's life. But my kids are okay. That's not going to happen to me. I'm a good driver. I'm a good parent. It's just common sense. Well, by these things that we've shown you today, it can easily happen when we can't see them. So what we want to change people to think of, it could happen to me. So what can I do to prevent it? Don't become complacent, because all it takes is one wrong move and your life changes. So our message, probably the biggest message of the day, is change your mindset. Gee, that really could happen to me. What can I do to stop it? And how can I change other people's thinking to do the same thing? Our message, our three messages is supervise, separate, and see. They're our key messages, and hopefully we can save some lives with those 3 points.
Those three little words, supervise, separate, see, actually come originally from KidSafe Australia. That is their driveway safety message that they use across the country. We also work closely with Kids and Traffic in Sydney and use that supervise, separate, see message as well, and also New South Wales Centre for Road Safety. Now, the little video that we showed at the start, and there's the second half of that at the end of this, we worked with Centre for Road Safety to put that together a couple of years ago, and that reiterates that supervise, separate, see message. For parents especially around children, separating kids from cars, vehicle areas at home, seeing where they are, checking, doing the circle of safety before you get in and drive. And active supervision, of course, is always number one. Whenever there's kids around vehicles, hanging on to them, making sure, especially when they're little, that 0 to 5 age group just do not understand personal danger. Kids and Traffic and KidSafe actually recommend you hold a child's hand up until at least 10 years old around vehicles, because they are still spontaneous and they don't stop to think, even though they know all this stuff. A classic example I tell many parents is our 8-year-old daughter a couple of years ago, walking through the local Big W car park. We were holding hands. Her hat blew off. Her instant reaction was to dive and grab the hat. And I pulled her up and I said, no, you must stop and check first. But because in that instant she didn't stop to think, and that's, children's brains are not developed enough to be able to toggle between knowing this and what they should do. So as part of our education campaign, we talk about the supervise, separate, see message at the various Melbourne baby expos that we do. We alternate between Sydney and Melbourne at the moment each year. There's a little picture there of when the Counting on You supervise, separate, see message was released. And also we work with corporates in terms of doing this particular presentation we can do for corporates as well. So getting that message out there. People are becoming new parents every day. They don't think about things in terms of kids around children, and also the education in terms of corporates and work sites, and really getting people that's getting the typical Aussie out of that she'll be right, mate attitude to, okay, righto, we do need to work on this. We do need to do something to make sure it doesn't happen. Okay, is there any questions on the education side of things so far?
We've just got a question from Blair asking whether you think it would be worth applying this guidance elsewhere, shopping parks, dropping kids off at school, and he'd be interested on your thoughts on that.
Certainly. The supervise, separate, see thing is something that can be used anywhere, and one of our key phrases that we use is that low-speed vehicle runovers can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. It could be a parent with a toddler in the driveway at home. It could be the old granny that ducks behind your car in the car park at the shops. It could be, you know, the mate on the bobcat on the work site down the road. So driveway safety or low-speed runover prevention is a responsibility of everybody, not just people with children or anything like that. So everybody needs to take that message on board and work with it. We look to people who can make a difference in terms of the environment. So people who design, architects and people who design shopping centres and car parks, you know, what space do they allow in those designs for vehicles and people to interact? Builders, designers of residential areas. There's a lot of work being done on shared spaces and how people and vehicles interact and are able to do that safely. So those sort of things are quite important in terms of the future and looking at creating safe places for people to be where it's still practical for us to be able to drive around to and from areas or get in and out of cars at the car park, but keeping everyone safe at the same time.
And on that, Chris says he teaches all drivers to reverse into car parking spaces, saves reversing blind into traffic, pedestrians. All car parks, he says, should have that instruction.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, the problem that comes whenever we do reverse, no matter whether we do it first or last, there's still a massive blind spot behind our cars. So just need to be wary that whenever we reverse, we are at risk.
That's a very good point. And Stephen says in a statement, kids under 10 have underdeveloped peripheral vision.
Exactly. And that's why you get a lot of primary school age children involved in accidents, you know, in and around roads, running across the road at school, you know, from out from behind the bus and things like that. And it's, once again, it's education, not just of the children at that age, but we need to really get the message through to parents. Parents still need to realise, I know their kids are growing up and they want to be independent and all the rest of it, but I still make sure I have a nearly 12-year-old and a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old. I still make sure I hold their hands, all four of us are holding hands when we walk across the road or through a car park. And it's getting that message out to parents. I know there's a lot of programs that happen in the schools, the education department, and that's great, but we need to make sure as adults that we're educating ourselves and each other in terms of keeping kids safe around vehicles, because that peripheral vision, that lack of ability to toggle between things. You know, our kids know all of this message, but I still panic when I think that they're going to be trying to cross the road by themselves. So, you know, it's educating the parents. It's just as important, if not the most important thing we need to do.
And Eric has asked if there are rules about site display requirements at driveway/footpath interfaces that could be improved, in your opinion. And we can.
Yeah, my answer to that is yes, certainly.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what we're trying to do: get the people that can actually make that difference to put their hands up and certainly, get that in place. So the driveway design guidelines, it's probably the closest thing that we could look at for that. That's the closest thing that we've got on file at the moment. But if anybody's out there with ideas, certainly contact us and we'll see where we go.
Thank you. And I was just interested if you could tell us about your relationship with Dana. How did that come about?
Well, we actually attended the National Road Safety Forum in Sydney a couple of years ago, where Jim Appleby, the safety manager at the time, did a presentation on near misses and reporting near misses in order to mitigate risk. And we approached him because one of our issues with this type of incident is that the national data isn't there when it comes to low-speed vehicle runovers, especially in terms of injuries and near misses, because there's no one collection place for that sort of data, because many of them happen either on private road, on the grey area between the public road and private land. So there's no way of us actually knowing the real statistics when it comes to just injuries or near misses. And so we were very interested when we heard him speak on that, and we approached him, and he actually said, I want to talk to you, because it turns out that our story fits in very well with what they were trying to put together for the Red Zone Mission Possible program that they ran last year. And so we got chatting to Jim, and then he actually flew us down to Melbourne to do our presentation for his safety managers a couple of months later. And then at the start of last year, they got in touch with us and said that they would like to be a corporate sponsor of ours, which was fantastic, because that means we were able to get that message out to so many people. So we were involved with Downer when they did their week of travelling last year to put the Mission Possible message out to their employees and colleagues in all of the states, and the red zone dovetail perfectly with what we do with the 10-metre blind spot zone that we have behind the vehicle when we do our blind spot displays. So the same messaging just married up very well. So we're so appreciative to Downer for everything they've done for us and all the help that they've given us. And we had a double whammy with them because, as Peter mentioned earlier, when we've done the presentations for the workers and talking about safety on the work site, those guys and ladies also took that message home then, and there was many responses in terms of, we're doing the red zone thing at home as well and keeping our kids safe at home. So getting that message out there and having it permeate everything, that it's not just a in this bucket thing, it's something that should be thought about in all areas by, everybody.
That's really great to hear that you've got that great relationship, and it's always, I think, reinventing how to get the message out, and
that's right. So that people then take it on board. I had spoken to Laurie Lawrence, who does Kids Alive Do the 5, and hear him every year on the radio or on telly reiterating that Kids Alive Do the 5, keeping kids safe around the pools message. And that's what we want to get with the driveway safety message, because not everybody's got a pool, but nearly everybody has something to do with vehicles. Even if you don't own a car, if you're walking down the street to get to the railway station, there's a good chance you're going to go past a driveway or cross a road. So everyone needs to be aware.
And anyone wanting to watch the Downer webinar is on the NRSPP website, so more information there. And Moses has said thank you for, Moses says, thank you from Safe Kids New Zealand for sharing your story with us. Keep up the good fight as we are here in New Zealand.
No worries. Thank you, Moses. And I can't think of the fella's name that I used to be in contact with over there, but thank you to Safe Kids for allowing us to use some of their information as well. It's been, I did a lot of looking at the research that they did over there, and it's been great in support as well. So thank you.
Moses says, was it Anthony Roller?
That's the one. Yes, Anthony. And I was sad to hear he's gone on, but yeah, no, I'm happy to keep up in touch with you guys over there too.
Great. Well, we've got another video that people might search for and have a look later, and we'll pop it up on the website. But let's talk through that one, Emma and Peter.
I will. Yep. So we've been fortunate enough to gain Scott Cam as our ambassador, or one of our ambassadors, and he teamed up with Centre for Road Safety when we did the video. This is our little girl, Georgie, one of the news articles that we did earlier on, not long, 6 months or so after the accident happened. And so Scott reiterates the message about that affects, this sort of accident can affect everybody, and reiterating the message about supervision, actively supervising, holding hands, picking up kids and hanging on to them, separating the access, putting the door handle up higher, making sure you can see from the driveway in and out, so pedestrians can see in as well as driver seeing out. Talking about not playing in the driveway, treat the driveway like a small road. Kids don't play in the road, they shouldn't play in the driveway. And there's doing our circle of safety, checking around to make sure there's no one around that can be hurt. And there's those 3 key words: supervise, separate and see. So that's the second half of the video that we played earlier on. All of that put together by the Centre for Road Safety, Transport for New South Wales, which was very much appreciated. And, and this is the last little bit, was just a quote that we found from HomeSafe Group. HomeSafe Group is run by a fellow who used to be heavily involved with KidSafe in Victoria. Home safety design does not add cost, nor does it compromise design integrity, but it can save lives. There's no worse situation than seeing your loved ones injured in your own home, later realising that it could have been prevented. So that's a little message there. And just for anyone who's interested, one of the things that we do, we are happy if there's any corporates out there who are interested in getting this message out to their employees and their workers, please get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to work out something to come and talk to your workforce. We do charge a fee for corporate presentations, but my aim is that the more support we get from corporate organisations, that will enable us to help keep things like the learner driver displays that we do for Year 10 students at high schools for free. We also do some for early childhood centres as well. And so if we get the support from corporates, getting that message out there to their workers, then that will help us enable to keep the things we do for the schools and early childhoods, fee-free if possible for them. So we're getting the message out to a whole range of audiences then.
And any other way that people can support?
Certainly, if you wanted to have a look on our website, share our information around. There is a tab on there somewhere if you'd like to make a donation. Every little bit helps. We're actually planning on a donation to a family who lost a little one earlier in the year at a town nearby here for Christmas this year. I usually have, in terms of the support that we do, I get in touch with families via local police when we hear of accidents happening. I actually had to post off a package this morning for the little girl that was run over on the weekend in Victoria. So we send out packages where, we leave it up to the families to get in touch with us. We've probably got a good half dozen families that we keep in touch with on and off. We also support them through sending first anniversary candles out and just keep in touch with them to know, so that they know that there's someone out there who's been through it that they can talk to if they wish. We can provide some financial assistance to those families too if they need it. So all of that, plus doing the presentations that we do and the baby expos and things like that, obviously, it's time and cost. So any contribution that anyone would like to do can certainly help out. And as I said, share our information with family and friends and that. We have a Facebook page as well, so regularly posting things on that. So, yeah.
It's such great work. And so you've got changing physical environments, changing vehicles and technology and education awareness, and you've got supervise, separate and see. And I know Peter's one big thing is don't get complacent around technology. Anything further to add?
No, I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
I think we've said everything.
Thank you so
much.
No worries.
Thank you very much, Rosemary, and everyone who listened in.